Steve Wilson. I'm editor of this newspaper. Our people process more than 500,000 words daily and boil them down to the hardest-hitting stories that we can print, consistent with American tradition and newspaper ethics. The motto on our masthead reads, Primo Veritas, truth first. We do a pretty good news job in our paper, but what appeals most to our readers is our lineup of columns: gossip, society, sports, and our helping hand column, in which we run anonymous requests for help. The column's called Your Good Neighbor, and it's run by a good reporter, Nan Fry.
Mrs. Bertha Dillon?
Yes?
Nan Fry. I do the Good Neighbor column in the Illustrated Press.
Oh, yes, Miss Fry.
We printed a letter of yours. We have a man who'd like to fill your request, Mrs. Dillon, but I'd like to make sure of the sizes. May I come in?
Well, my daughter's asleep. She works very hard, and this is her day off.
Well, this will only take a minute.
Sit down.
Oh, thank you. Now, let me see. Suit, 40 long. Shirt, 15 neck, 34 sleeve. Hat, 7 1/8. Shoes, 9 1/2.
Yes, those are right.
Mrs. Dillon, the man that's offered to supply this wardrobe has asked me to tell you that there's no hurry about paying, even though you said you would.
Oh, my son-in-law will insist.
Must have been awfully hard, his being ill so long. What had he done before, Mrs. Dillon?
Oh, he was in air conditioning, a junior executive. He just got a promotion and a raise, and he was celebrating when...
Oh, is this Mr. Gavin?
Yes. Yes, that's Edward.
He's awfully nice looking.
The lines in his face are deeper now, and his eyes are different.
In your letter, you said you expect his release from the sanitarium soon.
Well, he's been away so long. Oh, they can't keep him there any longer.
If he's well, I'm sure they...
Dorothy, this is Miss Fry of the Illustrated Press.
I know, Mama.
I'm sorry I awakened you.
That's all right. Mama, I told you we can't accept things that way.
But he'll need the clothes so.
If he's to come home, they'll give him a suit. Miss Fry,
Dorothy.
Mama, please. You can thank the gentleman for us, Miss Fry, and tell him that the case has been misrepresented.
In what way misrepresented?
My husband is in the Carroll State Penitentiary.
I'm sorry.
I'm not ashamed of it. He did wrong, and he's paying for it.
It's been 10 years, Mrs. Gavin?
Yes.
And he's to be released next week?
I don't know.
Hasn't he completed his sentence?
Well, he goes up for parole today, but he's already been turned down twice. I don't know. I just don't know.
Relatives may visit prisoners at Carroll State Penitentiary one day a month. This was Dorothy Gavin's 122nd visit to her husband.
I know, Eddie. I know how tough it is on you, but it isn't going to be very much longer.
Another 10 years, maybe?
Don't say that, Eddie. Well, you'll get your parole this time, sure.
Why this time? I've been turned down twice before.
But you've been watching yourself. You haven't broken any rules, have you?
How do I know?
Eddie, you'll get your parole. I know you will.
No law against hoping.
Eddie, I wanted to talk to you about Mama. She thinks we...
So long, Dorothy.
You'll write me.
Yeah. Yeah, all right.
Later that day, Edward Gavin appears before the Parole Board. He is one of 40 convicts they will question in the course of 7 hours.
Well, Edward, how have you been doing?
All right, sir.
You've been on report a number of times this past year, Gavin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Davis.
They have 10 minutes with this man, Edward Gavin. They go over the ground. What of his feelings about the guards? Why has he been talking at night in his cell? Has he planned how he'll make a living if he wins parole?
Well, I was in air conditioning, and I think I can get back. I don't know.
Thank you, Edward.
That's it?
You'll hear from us by mail in 4 or 5 days.
Yes, I know. Thank you, sir.
Charlie, you covered a driving homicide about 10 years ago. A young man, Edward Gavin. He'd just been married.
What about it?
Well, look it over again, will you?
Oh, yeah, the kid killed Alderman Brandberg and his daughter. He'd been drinking. So?
Well, this was a first offense, but Gavin drew 20. How come?
Brandberg was popular. His daughter was pretty. Ames, the prosecutor, was a bearcat. You know Ames, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wilson, could someone keep a man in prison, even though he might deserve to get out?
No, hardly, Nan. The parole boards work independently of the prison systems. If a man's eligible, they'll...
He's been eligible for 3 years.
Well, if he's deserving, Nan, I'm sure that he'll get his parole. You know, parole boards are human, but they don't make many mistakes. Nan Fry is a woman, as well as a good reporter. She wouldn't let go of the Gavin story. But during the next few days, Charlie and I forgot it. We had a real top line to think about. A brutal double murder in a gas station in the suburbs.
Pretty good, Steve.
Come in.
Morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning, Nan.
Proofs on next week's columns.
Good. Buy you some breakfast.
Swell. I'm on my way to a restaurant on North Street to see Mrs. Gavin. She works there. Okay if we go there?
Depends on how good the joint is.
Charlie, what can they do to 3-minute eggs?
Well, for one thing, they can cook them 2 minutes.
Go on.
I should go for a stack of wheats and a couple of sides of sausages.
Good morning, Mrs. Gavin.
Good morning, Miss Fry.
I've made some progress, Mrs. Gavin.
And a stick of the ham and eggs over easy with some home fried.
That'll do for a start.
How could they?
What is it, Mrs. Gavin?
Why would they let him out? He's a killer. Why would they let him out and keep my Eddie in?
They're keeping Eddie in.
Yes. For the 3rd time. The 3rd time.
Why had Abe Russell been paroled? Our readers asked that question 1,000 times within the next 24 hours. There had to be an answer from the governor of the state. Yeah, I'm waiting.
Yes, Steve?
Charlie, I'm getting through the governor. Get somebody on line, too, will you, to cut in and take a statement?
Right.
Wilson here. Hello, Governor Ryan.
Mr. Wilson.
We're having an unusually strong reaction from the public on the Abe Russell case, Governor.
Yes, I imagine so. You know, of course, that he's just escaped a police trap.
Yes, I know, Governor.
That's what held me up. Oh, Lloyd. Better get on. It's Wilson. I'm having my press secretary, Lloyd Strong, listen in, Mr. Wilson.
What is the general tenor of comment?
Hello, Lloyd. Well, it's overwhelmingly critical, Governor Ryan. Every charge from bribery to imbecility is being leveled at the Parole Board.
Unfortunate. They're honorable men doing a difficult job. I have a statement, Mr. Wilson. The State Board of Parole is served by 6 eminent professional and businessmen who several times each month surrender their time to journey to our state institutions and hear from the prisoners themselves their reasons for feeling they deserve parole.
These 6 men are beyond pressure, beyond bribe. Into every decision they make, and they make hundreds each month, enters a factor that is the most unpredictable of all, the human factor. If one could judge this, there would be no prisons in the first place. So instead of judging the men of the Parole Board by the action of Abraham Russell, I recommend most humbly that they be judged instead by the thousands who have been released on parole and have been returned to a useful place in society.
That done, you will find the men of our Board of Parole are to be commended. Anything else, Lloyd? Will that be satisfactory, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, thanks very much, Governor.
Maybe we ought to start a drive for a statue of these guys down in the park. What a whitewash.
Well, the Governor's right about one thing, Charlie. These men are honorable.
And dumb.
No, not dumb.
Well, this certainly doesn't say why Russell was paroled.
Now, that's something we're going to answer.
How?
We know about 2 cases who are up for parole. Abe Russell, who was paroled, and the husband of that girl who works in the restaurant.
Edward Gavin?
He wasn't. I don't know, Charlie, what are the facts behind something like that let one man out and keep another man in? I think we better put a couple of people on it. Have them check both cases, the background, the history, the reasons why they were sent to prison. Also have them check up the prison with some of the prisoners, the guards, the psychiatrists.
How about using Nan on the story? She can get people to talk and she can write.
All right, let her do the overall, but get started on it, Charlie. Oh, Charlie.
Yeah?
Front page of the Governor's statement. If that's what he really believes, I want everybody to read it. Good evening, Mrs. Gavin.
Good evening, Mr. Wilson.
Won't you sit down?
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, Miss Fry told me that you were investigating my husband's background.
Yes, we're digging on Abe Russell, too.
I still can't understand it. Releasing him, a known criminal, a killer. Eddie committed manslaughter, but it was an accident, Mr. Wilson. He wouldn't go out and deliberately do it again.
Well, evidently the parole board seems to feel differently, Mrs. Gavin. They must have some basis.
But they're wrong. They don't know Eddie. But they didn't know Russell either. What he was really like. What kind of a man he was before he went to prison.
Well, that's what our reporters are trying to find out about Abe Russell and your husband.
How long will it take?
Oh, another few days. Excuse me. Charlie.
Yes, Dave?
Do you mind coming in a minute, please?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson's been steering the story. You know all about it. Charlie, you remember Mrs. Gavin?
Oh, yes.
Hello, Mr. Anderson.
How are we coming on the Russell Gavin story, Charlie?
Well, it's a tough one. We had to get our hands on the probation reports. You know, the findings of the probation office, which guided the judge in imposing the initial sentences on the 2 men. We needed them to get a line on their friends and associates before they went to prison.
I could have told you all that.
Well, you'd have been too biased, Mrs. Gavin. We're trying to construct a very objective picture.
How long do you think it will take to do that?
Charlie?
3-4 days, maybe. Can't figure these things too close.
And then what? Suppose your reporters find out that Eddie does deserve a parole. How much longer will I have to wait for him?
I don't know, Miss Gavin.
This kind of thing takes a lot of time.
Eddie was sentenced to 20 years. He was eligible for parole after serving 1/3 of that sentence. They have kept him there almost 3.5 years beyond that, 40 months. Eddie and I didn't even have 40 weeks together. Do you know what that means? Do you? The waiting, the hoping, week in and week out, the monthly visits, the letters. It takes a lot of time, you said. How much longer do I have to wait? How much longer do you think I can wait?
Charlie Anderson had put a 3-man team to work. Nan Fry, Rush, Pete Snyder. to find and talk to people who had known Abe Russell or Edward Gavin as youngsters, people who had taught them or tried to teach them, people who had had them as tenants or worked with them, had seen how they acted in good times and bad.
So what I'm trying to get, Mr. Gavin, is an idea of what you really like, what makes you tick.
Eddie, please, they're trying to help us.
Yeah? All right, mister, what do you want to know?
Were you ever in trouble before, Mr. Gavin, before the accident?
No, not really.
Eddie, what about when you were in the Army?
Oh, that. I drew company punishment 5 or 6 times, confined to barracks, you know.
It was my fault. When Eddie came to see me on his furloughs, he'd wait until the very last minute. He'd get back to his base late.
It was worth it.
I read the transcript of your trial, Mr. Gavin. The prosecutor made quite a point of you being under the influence of alcohol.
I was. I admitted it. Doesn't mean I was a boozer.
He wouldn't drink at all for weeks, just sometimes on special occasions.
And this night was a special occasion?
Yeah. I've been working for this air conditioning outfit. They'd given me a raise to $75 a week and commissions. I could have made better than $8,000 a year.
You're planning on going back into that work?
That's what I told the parole board. Had a job promised me. But company's going to wait 10 more years.
Maybe they won't have to. Tell me, Mr. Gavin, how have you been getting along here?
According to the parole board, not so good. I'm a bad boy. I keep getting put on report all the time.
Put on report?
By the guards. One guard, Broderick. We don't get along. Can't do anything right as far as he's concerned. Thinks I'm trying to be smart, and he keeps telling me all the time.
Gavin's one of those smart Alecks. Well, I get so sick of these college boys that draw a jolt in the pen and then walk around smiling friendly like they've just been elected to some country club or something. Boy.
Maybe they're just trying to make the best of a bad situation.
Well, Carroll State is a penitentiary. Got no room for smart Alecks.
What can you do?
Well, there ain't anybody can obey all the rules in a prison all the time.
You put them, a person like Gavin, on report, then?
Well, they think twice about acting smart if they know what's going on their record.
Mr. Broderick, I understand a guard can put a convict on report if he just feels he's looking at him the wrong way.
Well, we don't do that very often.
Who did this roundup on Gavin and Russell's kids?
Nan and I split it up.
It's a good job. Rose, how about that coal mine? Line still tied up? All right, keep after it. Someone talk to the prison psychiatrist?
I did, Mr. Wilson. I was working on it when you called us in.
Can you sum it up?
Well, it goes like this. Russell's the kind of man who, under institutional care, subsides into a kind of a gray half-world of his own. Released from the rigid supervision, he's liable to find himself unable to function and depart from the normal behavior pattern. Gavin's the kind of man who'd be impatient under any kind of constant supervision, much less the discipline of a prison.
Yeah, Rose. Good. Yeah, just a minute. Charlie, anything you'll need me on tonight?
No, nothing I can't clear with you by phone. You going upstate?
Yeah, I'll know in a minute. Yeah. Yeah, put the governor on.
Governor. Gentlemen. Yesterday afternoon, Mr. Wilson asked by telephone if he might have a meeting with you and with me here in my offices. Last night, when I communicated his request to you, you of course had your own reactions.
I think it a completely uncalled for persecution of men who are trying to do a fair and honest job.
That's what you said, Mr. Davis. However, 2 things I have learned make it advisable for us to listen to Mr. Wilson. The first he told me yesterday. He has had 3 reporters investigating the background of Abe Russell and that of a second convict at Carroll State. Their findings are very interesting. The second is a piece of information I received just before I came into this room. The police have cornered Abe Russell in a tenement. He seems to have several guns and ample ammunition. Mr. Wilson?
Gentlemen, Governor, I will not sit here and let this man tell us we should have had second sight about Abe Russell.
Mr. Davis, I'm not saying you should have had second sight. I'm saying merely that you should have taken a good look the first time.
What do you know about it?
Only what I've learned from 3 professional reporters who talked to men and women who knew Abe Russell, and a man who is sitting out his 3rd refusal for parole, Edward Gavin.
Gavin? Well, he couldn't conform. It's all over his record. Mr. Wilson, we're doing a service keeping him behind bars. A service to society, to everyone concerned. Ready?
Would you excuse me, please, sir?
Of course.
Miss Gavin. Gentlemen, this is Mrs. Edward Gavin. Mr. Davis, Mrs. Gavin is an attractive, intelligent woman. Her husband has been in Carroll State Penitentiary now for 10 years.
10 years and 2 months. I mean 3 months.
In all that time, gentlemen, she has never once failed to make the monthly visits on visiting days to Carroll State Penitentiary. She spared no effort to help sustain him. She's written to him at least 3 times every week. Mr. Davis, do you think you're doing her a service by denying her husband a parole?
That's very touching, Mr. Wilson. But I still say Gavin did not and does not deserve parole. A man who can't conform in prison.
Thank you, Miss Gavin. Abe Russell conformed, Mr. Davis. He's still conforming. Right now, he's dodging police guns. Governor, I'm not saying the men of this board are knowingly wrong. I say this. We've looked into the record of each of these men. They're all, each in their own way, immensely successful. But they spent less time with each prisoner seeking parole than they would with the boys seeking the lowliest job in one of their companies. They spent an average of 10 minutes. Mr. Davis, you're president of General Factors. How many references do you require?
2.
4, Mr. Davis. I require 4 myself, and then I check with the applicant's previous employer. Governor, these are the stories. They're the truths about Russell and Gavin. Russell, a man who's been living on the edge of the law from the time he was 15 years of age. Psychologically, he could conform in prison but couldn't outside. Gavin, a bright nonconformist who was in trouble in the Army unless there was shooting. At that time, he happened to win a Distinguished Service Cross. He was disliked by one of the guards. The guard thought that Gavin acted better than the other prisoners. It's all here and it's all written down, Mr. Davis, but it took hours to get, not 10 minutes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, Mr. Davis?
Do you propose that we throw over our jobs and dig into the lives of 12,000 prison inmates?
I don't propose that you do that, Mr. Davis. I propose that it be made a job. It's the only way we can be fair to the men and to ourselves.
Mr. Wilson, I've been reading the Broderick interview. He actually said that Gavin was the kind of man he liked to put in his place?
If it's here, he said it. But Mrs. Gavin knew about the guard's dislike. It's been going on for 10 years. The interesting thing is that Gavin had no trouble to speak of with the other guards.
Broderick may have given us the wrong impression of a number of men. Jim, I believe we'd better review Gavin's case.
Well, I'll admit we may have been wrong in this one instance.
It seems that we were. But, Mr. Wilson, if we made a mistake...
It was an honest mistake.
Hello? Yes? Uh-huh. All right, I'll tell the governor.
They got Russell, but he'd killed 2 policemen before they did it. Gentlemen, that will be all. Thank you very much. I'd like a word with Mr. Wilson. It's a big state, Mr. Wilson, and we have a lot of problems.
That's true, Governor.
No one man or any group of men can understand and cope with all of them, but we've got to try. I want your help, Mr. Wilson. I'm going to appoint a committee to look into the parole system. I'd like you to serve.
As window dressing for another survey that winds up filed and forgotten?
Wouldn't be much chance of that with a newspaper editor on the committee, would there? Well?
You're on, Governor. Good day.
Bye.
Miss Gavin, I don't think you have to wait much longer.